Hello, BookTube. We're back
Hello.
here with
Hello.
tale 3 and 4 of City for City in March. And so far, as guests, I've got Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads and Gramp Stevens.
Hello.
Brandy hopefully will show up shortly, but until then, we'll just sort of start we'll just sort of chit chat for a few minutes to see if she shows up. And both of you have read pretty well up to the same parts. You've read the 3 and 4 that we're going to discuss today, and we'll do the same as last week. We'll try to refrain most comments to the stories under discussion today, but then in reference to, because we've already read the other ones, so we can refer to that, but no sort of spoilers, I guess. As if you can spoil.
We can't tell them it was about cookbook in the end.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You just ruined it.
Hello, Alex Day.
Hello, Alex.
Hey. I should put my
And Aaron's here.
Aaron, excellent. I saw his video on these stories. Very good.
Yeah, he did the first two as well, and I couldn't share it. YouTube just wouldn't allow me to share it. I don't even think I could I tried to put a comment on, and I couldn't do it. But then the second one, I was able to share it, and then I went back to try to share the first one again, and it still won't do it.
I have not seen it, but my excuse is I was in a foreign country at the time and not watching a whole lot of YouTube.
That's excellent.
Did you see
I was in a foreign
there?
country at the time is an excuse that I'll use often. That sounds like a good one.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can go. Do each of you want to sort of describe census, or one of you, maybe Greg, census, and Gramp Stevens do desertion?
Sure. Yeah.
Just sort of a rough general.
I think I'd be better at desertion, but I can.
Okay. Well, did you want to do it the other way then, Scott? Do you?
Sure. Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah. And census. Census is a story that to me just conveyed a lot of kind of connecting information. There wasn't a super strong story as far as plot and everything like that. I think it introduced us to some things that we need later. Is that your assessment too?
Pretty much. That's why I didn't want to start with it, because it didn't feel like a short story. Like you said, it felt like he was trying to make this book, and he says, I need a connection between the earlier.
Like, I need to introduce some things here. And
also,
but there are some fascinating things that occur. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then it's linking back too, because the backwoods people are sort of like, it's suggesting they're descendants of Ollie Johnson, the farmer, and the squatters in first city book. They're still sort of under the radar and off grid, I guess you would say.
Right. So I have my Kindle version. That's why I keep looking over this way. I got actually I can probably just pop it right over here. So it starts off, the first words are, Richard Grant was resting beside the little spring that gushed out of the hillside and tumbled in a flashing stream across the twisted trail when the squirrel rushed past him and shinnied up a towering hickory tree. There's a sentence. So Richard Grant is a census taker, and he's traveling around some of the territory that we've seen in previous stories and counting people. And there was a question there right at the beginning, why do you guys care? And he said, well, I guess they've just gotten around to it, And also here at the beginning of the story, we have Nathaniel, who is a dog. And so now there's dogs that are I guess more advanced than even the dogs we've seen up till now. And Nathaniel is quite a talker. So there's lots of conversations there. And I think that one of the themes of this whole thing is different intelligences, things other than man, and that's one of the things that the dogs give. But they Grant meets Thomas Webster, one of our famous Webster clan, one of Gramp Stevens' descendants, I guess, or no, not really, but Gramp Stevens was there with the first Webster we met. That's where the Webster connection is. And then Grant starts to talk to him about the hill folk or the people that we've seen earlier on just kind of show up and help somebody fix something and then disappear. In a previous story, he was given that one of these hill folk was given this philosophy that what was his name? Joanne.
No, are we getting no? I see. I get the stories confused of what happened in each story.
Right.
And I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
But
Thank you.
he is. But Grant is looking for the mutants.
Right, and that's what they're calling these guys is the mutants, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, the mutant is given these notes from Joanne. And wasn't that in a previous story? Because in this story,
that's in Census. Yeah,
that's in Census. Okay, so he's given that, and in this is when he looks at the philosophy, and again, there's again this other intelligence, this mutant intelligence that also thinks differently. And this person looks at this philosophy and says, "Oh yeah, I can finish it. In fact, he made a mistake right here." And so this is one of the things early on, when it's talking about Thomas Webster, it talks about, there's this legacy of the family that they screwed that up, that they, because of that agoraphobia in the last tale.
That's where I was trying to figure out where the Joanne story was second story.
Right. Yeah. Joanne has appeared in that one. And then, so you're right. So I got a little bit ahead, a little confused between this one and Paradise, which is the fifth story. But so in this story, that's so Grant, the census taker, finds these mutants, hands on this philosophy, and then the mutants say, or the mutant that we meet says that, I know what to do with this. And
he basically steals it.
Yeah, he basically takes it.
I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to tell you. I can use it myself.
Right. So another bit in this story that has to do with intelligences too is what so there's also Jenkins the robot, and then there's also ants, right? So the ants are one of the things that the mutants did is they worked it out so that the ants don't need to hibernate. They never go into this hibernation state, and then suddenly ants start to progress down the intelligence chain, I guess. So yeah, you've got all these intelligences floating around.
Now my question is, did he ever explain, maybe I missed it, how the mutants became mutants?
No,
I don't think so.
No, it's just like it could be a next evolution in humans. It could be an evolution in humans or a mutation. It's never really. I don't know if it's a spoiler to say that I think the mutants are almost like a contrived storyline.
See, when I hear mutant from stories in the 50s, I immediately think of mutants running out from a bomb site, nuclear radiation, and that's my go-to from a story of that era. But I got no sense of nuclear radiation anywhere in this story that would cause that kind of mutation. It's just just a convenience he threw in the story.
Yeah, I think mainly that's it, but it's not just that. There's more to it because of the way the intelligence is. Because the one thing that's kind of interesting that I found is that I guess it's in the first story where they were talking about that they couldn't get, people to move from the cities, but then all of a sudden you give them free land. Oh, I'll take that, or cheap land. They move out because it's something for them. And then Richard Grant is talking to this backwoods family, or the guy say, well, why would I want to give you basically my information? And it says, well, the government would like to have it, and they might want to pay you something. Oh, well, that's different then.
Yeah.
And then Joe the mutant is it's not self-preservation, but he's greedy as well for himself, that he can use this philosophy for himself.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that you sort of see in this, where humans are very for themselves.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. So Grant was trying to talk to me, and I've got it here in front of me. It says, then you can finish it, And Grant knew no use of going on. He read the answer in Joe's eyes. And a couple lines later, Joe says, I can use this thing for myself.
Aaron makes a perfect point. Yeah, you just this is basically the assumption that you can make, is that the mutants as occurring naturally because they remained on Earth without the advances in technology and society of the rest of humanity. Yeah. That's sort of an assumption that you can easily make, because he doesn't go into details.
Yeah, and the details that he does talk about, once the philosophy comes up, he's talking about social pressure, and social pressure is a major thing for humanity. Social pressure was the thing that held the human race together through all millennia, held the human race together as a unit, just as the hunger pressure had held the ants enslaved to a social pattern. And then later on it says, was this the trend of mutancy, this sloughing off of the basic instinct that made man a member of the race? So again, this is one of the things I love about science fiction, is being able to look at humanity from outside of it. So I think the mutants are separate, right? And I love what Aaron said there. Yep, occurring naturally somehow. Famous cat.
Yeah.
Here he is, Teddy.
Yeah.
You want to photobomb the live show, so I know.
Well done. Yeah.
The one thing with Courtesy was that he submitted it in January of 1944, but it was sent back to be resubmitted.
By Campbell?
Yeah.
Are we talking desertion? Are we talking still?
This is Census. Census, yeah.
But this was the second. So when was Desertion written?
Desertion was written in 1943. So it was the first one written, and it was held back. He was paid $50 for it, for Desertion. But for Courtesy, it was sent back to be resubmitted, the quotation marks that David W. Dixon uses. And so it usually means that it was sent back for rewrites. What the rewrites were, I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any information, or at least David Wixon hasn't shown any information on that, if there is anything in Simak's diaries and that. But I'm assuming he must have gone through all that. At least we hope he did.
So, Sean, was $50 a good price for a story back then, or was it still sort of like cheap?
Well, it wasn't much for Desertion, but it is short. But he got 175 for Census.
Okay.
So he got a lot more for all the other stories. And then when we get to Desertion, there could be a reason for that as well. But yeah, no, Census really sort of, it's a bit of a ties in everything that came before the first two stories, as I say, with the moving out from the cities, with the descendants, or metaphorical descendants of the squatters in the city and the farmers. And also it continues on, like the repercussions, not repercussions so much, but that there still is this. The Webster family feels shame of what Jerome Webster wasn't able to do, even though it became recognized as something that he couldn't do. He couldn't change his nature, in order to do that. But they still feel that in many ways, and hence, where is it Bruce? I think it is. Yeah, that is uplifting the dogs. It's sort of giving. It's sort of done as a giving back, for that.
Yeah.
So it ties all this together, but then it sets things up for the other stories as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Lays out that meeting with the mutant and gets him what he needs to get. Right. And we also have a nice bit with the dogs.
Yeah.
So that's the other piece.
I think Nathaniel. The first story where you're really getting into the dogs coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nathaniel is, like they even say, like the doggish editors are saying, is a favorite character, that he seems to show up in many other stories. And he's like, there's no way that he could have lived and done everything that they say he did. But you can just sort of, you can just picture this dog, flapping tail, tongue flapping around, and then going, hello.
Yeah.
And I could just see something like, why is there a talking dog? Now, in this story, I mean, it gets kind of funky, and I don't want to give there is the Webster family, but are there other families across the world, or they have all disappeared at this point? Except for the ones in Geneva.
They are, but it's confined mostly to the Western, because you got the Backwoods family,
right?
With the kids telling Richard Grant about the ants, that they found the anthill, because it was sort of a story or a myth that Joe would put a greenhouse over top of an anthill, but they found it, so he's staying with them for a little while. And so there are other families. There seems to be, we don't quite see it in.
Well, we know a little bit because of desertion, but
yeah,
would they have intelligent dogs too, or is it only the Websters that have the intelligent dogs?
These are just the first ones. He's only recently did this, so it's the first dogs that can talk. So nobody else has talking dogs as such yet. The only thing, another thing that seems a bit weird is that, because we don't have an exact date for census, but we know it's because Huddling Place takes place around 2128-ish, and you've got the old Webster there going off to Mars to become an engineer. And so he's now old. So we're getting close to 2200. But then Grant says it's been 300 years since the last census, which seems a little odd, because that's not quite right. So I don't know where that comes in, whether that's just a bit of a mistake or.
Well, as I got it, like it's sort of becoming what I call a libertarian paradise on Earth, where you have or a very minimal centralized government that doesn't do anything at all. And they're shocked that why even bothering with a census?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because everybody's got their own hydroponics, everybody's got their own power plant, everybody's got their own land.
Living off the land like the Backwoods ones are. Right. But it's because the population has been dwindling, as they say, because people are leaving to the other planets. They're actually leaving Earth, except like the Webster family has stayed, and the Backwoods people have stayed. So mostly there's going to be other families like Webster's there, but by the sounds of it, most of them have left Earth and gone to other planets.
I kind of got the impression at this point that there was a lot of people on Earth. They just had abandoned the cities.
Yeah, because when you get to desertion, there's that point. Can we sort of segue a little bit into desertion? Just
but they do talk about that because of the population has been dwindling in census because people have been going to the other planets. That's prompted the census.
Right, and at least in desertion, there the whole big question is, I guess, just explain a little bit of the storyline. You have Richard Grant again. I think he's the same Richard Grant because there's the dog Nathaniel, and they're now. Am I getting
not in desertion? No, the desertion is at a later time, unspecified time in the future. It's
so desertion is the Jovian one,
right?
With it looks like Kent Fowler and his dog Towser.
Towser. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, go for it. Go for the synopsis. Yeah.
Because at that point, they're exploring the possibilities of moving people to Jupiter, but the Jupiter environment is not hospitable to human biology or any other earthbound biology. And they have this process where they will turn living earth creatures into Jovian lopers. And the whole idea is, well, we'll get some, maybe not volunteers, but we get some people to become lopers, and you'll go out and explore Jupiter, and you'll come back and you'll say, this is what it's like out on Jupiter. The only problem is no one ever comes back once they've been turned into a loper. And so then Fowler and his dog, was it Towser? He said, because normally it's just one human sent out. So Fowler says, I'm going out, but my dog would miss me too much. So I'm taking my dog with me, and we're going to both be lopers together. And once he gets out into the environment of Jupiter, I think there's just some really wonderful descriptions of this environment. The ammonia rains, and you're going, he's describing it as something foul to earthbound creatures, but he writes it in a way, they said, that would be kind of neat. And that's the problem once you become a loper, is like, you don't want to be a human again. So he and his dog go out and say, nah, we're not going to go back and report. And how many years were they out? 3 to 5? I think it's 3 or 5 years they were out.
He's right. Yep.
Yeah, that's in the next story, that it actually is. He stays out for 5 years.
Oh, that's not desertion. It's desertion.
No, it just ends with maybe we should go back, but and then he goes, no. The dog says they'll turn me back into a dog, and then me back into a man, and that's where it ends.
I'm sorry. I'm getting my stories confused here. You're right.
Hey, Sean, Aaron has a good question there.
Am I right in thinking that when someone is converted into a loper, they can be converted back to their human body? Yes. Yeah, they can. And it seems to be something. This is something new in the storyline too, because they talked about people leaving to the other planets. So this is a process that they've been doing successfully for other planets. It kind of begs the question whether they did it for Mars, but it doesn't seem like it. Like there's no mention of it in the previous.
There isn't, and that brings up the question. You had Jewel, the Martian. Was he originally a human transformed to fit onto Mars, or was he a native-born Martian?
I think he was a native-born Martian, because he says the Martians never thought of medicine and science. They developed differently, like the idea of philosophy. They made philosophy a science rather than using science. So
I like that idea too. And Martians plus humans,
yeah,
they shared a bunch and made each other, or kind of uplifted each other in a way.
But it looks like because they've been using this, and the woman that's controls is the one that controls the machine, the converter. She's done this on other planets, so they know that they've done this. So, but they don't say which planets, but obviously probably Venus, Saturn, possibly, any of the other planets, because we got a dwindling population. But Jupiter seems to be the one that is the problem, a bit of a problem child, I guess you would say, that because nobody's coming back yet.
Right, and that's we have to cut off, because that's where I've been merging my two stories, because those two stories are really just like
they're the only two stories that sort of back together.
Right.
Is Desertion, and then Paradise is the next story.
Yeah, because and you need, for the next story, you need them both. You need Census and Desertion for the next story to happen.
Yeah, right. And then also you need Census.
Right, that's what I mean. Is that not what I said? Census and Desertion both.
Yeah.
Feed the next story. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there. But I guess I might get it back. But as I say, Desertion was the first story that was written. Now, and this is something that I've come across before, but this essay here, written by Peter Sikora for World Literature Studies in 2021, it's like a 15-page essay. He is in the Slovak Republic, Department of Philosophy and Applied Philosophy, Faculty of Arts. And the neat thing is he dedicates the story for my dog Fitzy as well. But he talks about that because Desertion was sent first, like it was the first story written and sent to Campbell in July 1943, but it wasn't published. Now, the question he raises, is it because, like David Wixon says, the executor, that it was held back because they contrived to create this multi-story story?
Well, that was my question for you guys. Is probably the same question he's asking is, was this originally just supposed to be a standalone story that he wrote once, and someone says there's a lot of potential here that you're not exploring?
That's the question, and there's really no full answer, because Peter Sikora suggests that, you see, it goes against John W. Campbell's philosophy of science fiction, where you're no longer human, that you're sort of moving out, and so he might not have liked it. He didn't want it, but possibly Simak said, well, this is only part of a story that I'm going to do, or he developed it after it. David Wixon thinks that possibly it was written as a standalone story, and he planned on maybe writing more stories about the Lopers, but then it got diverted into, with possible discussion with Campbell, to the city storyline. It's unclear. And Peter Sikora says, well, there might be hints or answers in the John W. Campbell letters, or the diaries of Simak. But the only letters that seem to be available are the 2 volumes that, you've got, Scott, and I've got them as well. And there's no mention in there about this.
Yeah.
As well as Wixon, I'm assuming he's gone through, because he does pick out stuff from letters that is in the Simak archive and his notebooks and diaries, and he doesn't mention any of this. So,
no. See, what would be an interesting experiment? I mean, I can't do is give someone Desertion to read, first and see if the whole idea of the talking dogs really fits. I mean, for me, reading the other story, it just fit in organically and perfectly. I understood exactly what was going on. But there are some in some science fiction stories that say, that just does not fit in perfectly.
Yeah,
it just seems like a contrivance, like the mutants. He just dropped it in without any explanation. So that's
but yeah, with Towser being changed into Loper, he can now telepathically. Kent Flower can telepathically talk to his dog. So yeah, so is that where it sparked the idea? But also too, this is after the fact, but there were people writing, like Conrad Lawrence, were writing things about intelligence in dogs at the time. Like, did some of this stuff rub off? Because Simak was a science editor at the newspaper, so he would have been up on especially popular science books. So did all this stuff come to fruition and then discussion with Campbell, and Campbell relented? And because it does go against Campbell's view of humans going out into space and conquering.
Mm-hmm.
And because, as Peter Sikora says, that it's one of the first post-human science fiction stories where humanity doesn't take over the universe. And I don't like it. I've read this before, but I don't. You'd have to really do a lot of research and reading everything that came before it to see if there are any stories that have hints of this, but it could very well be the first. So he started a trend for science fiction where humans are not the inheritors of the universe.
Interesting.
And this is sort of almost against Campbell's view, because Campbell refused to take the simple way, or it was called Trouble with Ants. So
that's interesting. It was called Trouble with Ants.
Yeah.
Does it have any similarities to what happened with ants in Census?
Yeah.
Because
he refused to take it, and Simak just took it as, well, he has a right to. He said he was tired of the stories, so he just didn't. He didn't take it. But as Peter Sikora in this essay says, well, Simak just seems too kind-hearted to have thought, anything else regarding Campbell's philosophy of science fiction. And so he was also tired of it, because he's going, this is not what I want in science fiction. So that's
interesting.
ended.
It does have the telepathy that he likes, Campbell likes.
Yeah. So I think that's something that probably with desertion that might have twisted his arm. Like, you see, I don't know. See, this is the thing. It's unclear of how this all developed, because desertion was the first written. That's the thing, because you can, in retrospect, see how it fits in, but it doesn't quite.
I see. I'm trying to clear it in my mind. In desertion, were there mentions of the robots, or are they completely sort of outside of that? I don't remember.
I don't remember a robot in this one.
No,
were robots involved with the transfer process or something?
No, it's just a machine that a woman runs.
Machine. Okay.
It's not really explained. You just a device turns into something else.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
Aaron says here, when I read Desertion, its connection to the previous three stories seemed a bit tenuous, unlike Census.
Yeah, I agree.
It is to a certain extent, but then when you do look at it, that because the intelligences of the dog and Fowler, of Towser and Fowler, you can see where it could have been the germination of everything, because of them becoming equal, and they're both intelligent. Because it does speech make intelligence, or is there intelligence like in the dog, but they can't speak? And it's showing there that there is intelligence once the whole brain is used.
Yeah, but I agree with Aaron. It seems tenuous, but it all is clear in the next story.
Yeah,
it becomes crystal clear. Yeah,
I mean, if I were to just guess, I thought Simak, he might have started writing an independent story, and in your mind, when you write a story, you sometimes tell yourself a backstory, even if it's not in the story. You have to tell yourself a backstory of how that character got there and acted that way. And that's kind of how I'm figuring that Simak did this. Is he started, well, if this is true, then in the backstory, this had to be true down there, and he just came up, building on it. Like I said, robots were not involved in desertion. So robots are an important part of these stories, especially, with Jenkins and all that. But so I think that was just an add-on after this story, and he just started building on it.
I think he had the idea, like he talks about that because of the Second World War, and the atrocities that were happening, he got sort of disillusioned with humanity. So I think that was the way he wrote this, where humanity could become something different and something better by changing into a loper. And then that theme sort of runs through, to a certain extent, all the stories. So he just kept that in sort of forefront of mind, possibly. And there could have been the discussions with Campbell, because Campbell may not have liked the story because of those reasons. And then Simak says, okay, well, I can do this then with this story. As you say, because he had this possible, background to it, a backstory. But we don't know. That's the thing. Yeah. It's just at this moment there's no information.
Well, you see, Sean, that is why you have literature students to write papers about this, and just at this point you could write a paper almost anything.
Yeah.
And if it's well written, you can present, okay, that's a possibility, and keep everyone.
Yeah, one of the things that has surprised me most about this read through is how philosophical this is, and how thoughtful it is, and this is definitely something that papers could be written on.
Yeah. See, that's the other thing that's Peter Soroka has hit on, like, in so much in this one little essay, are little bits and pieces that people have been hinting at and talking about in other previous writings, that Simak was sort of never thought of as a great player in science fiction, because no critics talked about him while he was writing, or very few.
Yeah.
And they pass him off as pastoral, as simply as that. And as he says here, that he's seen today overly sentimental and neo-romantic. And so people have disregarded him for those things. But if you look beyond that, you do see all this philosophy that's in there. And it's I forget who, it might have been Robert Silverberg, who said in the Easton Press introduction that he wrote in 1995, to say that to describe the story, a Clifford Simak story, is easy, the plot, but to actually go a little deeper and talk about what the themes and everything, that's not so easy.
Yeah,
you can't do it very.
There's a lot going on here, and even in the individual stories, there's like kind of a focus on certain things, but they're deeply philosophical ideas, and well thought out and presented. He's terrific.
But as I say, a lot of people have dismissed him over the years, but apparently, according to Soroka, and this is 2021, that he is getting a resurgence because people are now actually seeing those things in his writings.
I'm looking forward to the other stuff we're going to read. Are we going to see similar things in those? I mean,
a lot of stuff, even the ones that are just fun stories. Like next month, I was going to read, because we're doing The Dying Earth, so I thought I was only going to do every 2 months, but I thought, well, why not do something every month? And next month we'll do Enchanted Pilgrimage, because it's a fantasy, but it's a fantasy quest story, and it's like it says Mark Cornwell is a young man who asks questions in a society where all answers come from above. His questioning spirit leads him into deadly exile and a terrifying chase across nightmarish terrain. Goblins, gnomes, enchanted hellhounds, witches, and elves are Cornwell's companions and pursuers as they seek the carefully guarded secret of his civilization. His search for the caretaker, a legendary figure who may or may not exist, makes as stirring and unforgettable an adventure as Clifford Simak ever wrote. But just from that, you can see that there's going to be philosophical stuff in here of questioning things.
Very good. Yeah, I'll read that if I can, for sure.
I'm reading Les Miserables next month, so
I'm doing that as well again.
I might be a little push for squeezing things in.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to go for me, because my reading time these days are a lot shorter than it was. But
I think the groups are doing it as a 2-month or an 8-week read or something like that.
Oh, which one are you in? Are you?
I'm in both. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm only in Aaron's one, so I'm going to try to read it. It depends on how it goes, but anyway, yeah. So I'll be reading that.
I mean, a lot of people consider this one of their favorite science fiction novels. I think Michael Cavon has this as his favorite all-time.
Cool.
I mean, I'm calling it a novel, but it's kind of working as a novel. I mean,
it's because of the interstitial material that it's almost seamlessly done. It's like Michael Cavon did say that it's the best fix-up novel, and I think it is.
And what's like I said in my edition, it's not. They don't even have a table of contents, which is even most novels have a table of contents to say where the chapter starts, but it's like they're deliberately.
And that's interesting in that edition. I'm reading the ebook, and it's very clear separation.
Oh no! As I said, I have ebook and that. So this is how I've been reading it. We're going down Mexico. So
cool. Ooh, James Bond reread, awesome. I love it. Which book are you on right now, Aaron, in the James Bond reread? I have never read a James Bond novel.
Yeah, neither have I. That's
I definitely try it.
November is coming up again, and
yeah.
Well, in November is the I'll be doing New Worlds November, or at least science fiction. Hopefully, if
well, that's. I mean, that's probably just going to be short stories again. So
well, under 250. So. We're going to do Werewolf Principle by Simak during that month. So that's only 200 and something. A lot of his stuff is short, so it can fit in. It can fit in with things. But yeah, a lot of his stories are philosophical, and the thing is, like, they call him, pastoral, and they usually just pass it off as that. Not everything is pastoral. But generally, it is sort of a lot of stuff that is to the earth, and it's like this Peter Soroka is saying he's now being compared, because they always laud Ursula K. Le Guin for her ecological stuff. And now people are saying, well, Simak was doing that as well.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
for me,
sorry,
go ahead, Greg.
No, when you were talking about it, Pastor, I mean, I sort of get the feeling that
cool.
It's all this living out in the country by yourself and being self-sustaining, as I said, very much of a libertarian sort of, these people who want to go off and just live off the grid and have no contact with any other people other than their immediate families. And I can sort of see that in the story of just, and my question was probably too much of a modern sensibility, but if every family wanted to go out and get their own piece of land, we wouldn't have enough land, even if you had the technology to his technology to support. Now, maybe back in the 40s and 50s, that was a little more realistic, because he wouldn't be thinking of like all the people in China or India or whatnot. But
yeah. And the thing is too, like some people only have like an acre as well. It's like whatever they could afford as well. So yeah, I think, because I don't know what the population was in the 40s, even though it's set in the 1990s, or at least the first story is 1990. But I think he's basing a lot of this on the 40s. There's other anachronisms in there too. Is like in the first one, John Webster wears a hat everywhere he goes, and there's a lot of characters that are in 2100 or plus that are still wearing hats.
Well, a 40s man would never go outside of the house without his hat.
Exactly.
There's a hat.
But yeah, so that's the thing, and it's like that's a bit of an anachronism, but it works. But yeah, and the other thing is, like, he does have, because he bases a lot of this stuff on where he grew up in southwestern Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Because I live here in northern Utah, and this concept seems very possible here. Because we drive 15 minutes out of town, and we're in lots of empty space.
And I think the city in the first story is Chicago, and the reason why, like I said, that in the last video, is because they mentioned the loop, and I don't know of any other city that talks about the downtown area.
Wasn't he mentioning Geneva, where the last city is?
That's later. That's later. That Geneva shows up later. Yeah. And the other thing is too that we were talking about, that it's like there's so many things that as you go along in the story, like what happened to these people, like what happened to this? How did the squatters go from the city to becoming backwoods people and stuff like that? You could see that is the progression, but there's nothing in between, and there's a lot of questions, and you just sort of wonder how these things happen. It's like the other thing with the conversion to lopers. It like begs the question. So this is being done on the other planets because there is a lessening of population on Earth. There are humans turned into other forms on other planets at this time.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And it's this idea of the lopers too. It's like you become a loper, and all of these concerns that we have and worries, disappear. Yeah, because they don't need a land. They don't need land. I don't know. I can't remember how they get food, but that doesn't seem to be a worry either.
It doesn't really.
So it's just this paradise.
It does. But that also goes back to the Martian philosophy, that Martians never really got the concept of medicine.
Yeah.
It's just
because they must not have needed it.
Better, you know. I guess that was their idea, right?
Right.
But when you think about it, it's like, at least in South America, the wheel was never invented. And so these massive civilizations were done without wheels. Yeah. But they didn't. The Mayans did invent the number 0 as well. Apparently, only 2 people have ever invented the number 0. So you know, so it's kind of, it goes back. It's like, what would you really be like as a loper, except enjoying the ammonia storms or whatever, ammonia rain? And
like he says, he doesn't smell anything, but it's his whole body sort of gets the sensation of everything, and it's almost like smell, you know.
But yeah, I've got a paragraph here. So when they turned into a loper, he said he had found something greater than man had ever known, and this is in Desertion. He had found something greater than man had ever known, a swifter, surer body, a sense of exhilaration, a deeper sense of life, a sharper mind, a world of beauty that even the dreamers of the earth had not yet imagined. So that's interesting to me, because I think, I don't know how religious Clifford Simak was, but he was Catholic, I think. I don't know how practicing he was. Do you know anything about that, Sean? No, because this is just an interesting thing, because it's like, heaven, right? They talk about, a swifter, surer body, a sense of exhilaration, right? A deeper sense of life. These are all things, if you state them in this way, that Christians believe is coming, So I just kind of made that connection, and I had seen somewhere that Simak was Catholic, but I don't.
He might have been raised Catholic, but on reading this, I mean, now that you pointed out, there really is no mention of religion.
No, there isn't.
Or any sort of devotion to any sort of other being. So I'm going to make, when you don't talk about it, if he were truly Catholic, he would have had to mention it. At least in
possibly. I mean, but it's like, it's like Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. He was Catholic, and the ideas kind of ooze out of that story, but he doesn't mention it. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying that, if let's just say if he was raised Catholic, right? These ideas of what paradise is seem to come from that tradition, is my point.
Yeah, and he does later with the book we're going to read in September, or I'm going to, if anybody else is joining.
I'll be there. Hope. Yeah.
Project Hope.
And we'll see about what that is. Yeah.
And then there's another one, A Choice of Gods, as well. The more you read of him, you'll see a lot of themes coming up that he regurgitates in some ways, themes and ideas and philosophy, but then sometimes takes a little different slant at looking at it, depending on when it was written, because he even says that he he's a different person, or he was in 1973, so he could never have written the city stories that way. He thinks he could write them better as a better writer, but he would lose something from them. And Aaron's saying here, it's just there probably is space in the U.S. and Canada that would give.
That you can't argue with that. You can't. It's like, where are all the people in New York City going to go, or London, right? Yeah.
It's like I say, it's not like, to me, some people, like, I've seen it not just with this but other ones, they fixate on one thing in a story that is incorrect or wrong scientifically, and they just and it just ruins it for them.
It doesn't ruin it. It's just sort of an amusement. It's like he just didn't, because he doesn't think all. The thing is, you can't think through all the possibilities as one person. Someone's always going to come, well, you forgot this one area right there. So
and his idea, like he even says, he wanted to write a future where you could go from the horrors of what was happening in the Second World War to a fantasy land, in a sense, where things were better. and sometimes it's not just humans that are better. Like there's better things out there, or that can be better. Like basically the dogs, like Richard Grant says, basically he tells them that you've got to be a better human than humans are, and to remember this. He doesn't say it in those words, but that's what he means. And Jenkins, in a sense, becomes a better human than humans.
Right.
He eventually does.
Yeah, very much so. I'm kind of looking up that piece, but yeah.
And also Simak had this belief too that there was like a brotherhood of beings, like, you know, everybody had their place and had, you know, equal, like aliens and that. He never was a person when he talked about aliens. He didn't think that this is what he basically thought, that if you had enough intelligence and power to go to other galaxies or to other planets, you don't need slave labor. Why would you don't need war to do all this kind of stuff. And that was his belief, whether you know you agree with it or not, but that's what he sort of believed, that it would be counterproductive for this, and so there wouldn't be aliens that would come and slave a planet.
Right. Okay.
Because they what would they need the labor for? They've already got energy to do everything that they want to.
Yeah.
You know, their spaceships aren't going to be run with hamster wheels, you know.
Right. Well, isn't what it's called now post-abundance civilizations? Is that the terminology?
I've heard that term before. Yeah.
Or is it post? I mean, I think it's called post-abundance. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly the terminology, but the idea is that in the future you have everything. Everyone can get everything they want to. Like, in their little houses here, it's like you don't need to have war because it's there for you if you want it.
Yeah, well, that's his idea, that with this, that once people moved out of the cities, they had everything they want, and like, you know, and then he even talks about where the government sort of has no control over people because there's a centralized committee, but these people are spread out everywhere. They don't need the government. They've got everything they want and everything that they need, and then so is the government going to say, "Oh, we're going to go to war," and people are going to go, "What?" Well, you go yourself, you know.
Yeah.
And then the idea was, and I know, like Aaron didn't quite believe this, he didn't think it fit in with it, that because once you took away the cities, there were no targets for atomic warfare.
You're the one that mentioned is like that's the you can't have a nuclear war at that point because you don't have enough nukes.
And where do you point them? And like, you just point them everywhere. Okay, fine, you can do that, but also too, thinking back of, because he added this after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he added those bits to the story in City after the fact. So those bits were added. Oh, that's the other thing I want to say. I've been reading the magazine versions and then the published version, and I've noticed differences in both, or additions in both City and Huddling Place, but I haven't really noticed anything. If there is, I'd have to go sentence by sentence comparing, because if there is, it's just a minor word here or there that he's changed. It hasn't changed any of the ideas. It hasn't added any ideas.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at the publication history in the book, where it looks like the last stories in here are 1951.
Yeah, and that's because he'd written it in 46 or 47, but Campbell said no, he didn't want it, so he just let it sit. And then the sister magazine, sort of low-level magazine, Fantastic Adventures of Amazing Stories, he sent it in, and it was published. He kind of thinks they probably didn't know it had anything to do with the City stories. And then at some point in the late 40s up to 1952, Gnome Press published the novel, or the fix-up novel, he wrote this interstitial material.
That was my next question. Is like all the because honestly, some of those pieces are some of my favorite pieces of the book so far. It's just
well, it's a parody at the one time, and the other thing is, it's like I love the fact that the dog editors are saying, oh, this is a contrived storyline. You know, humans are contrived to get the idea across of the narrator. Well, Simak contrived the dogs, the interstitial material to get that across, you know, the other things across. And it just, you know, falls back on each other, which I just love. And that's why I agree fully with Michael K. Vaughan when he says that it's the best fix-up novel. It is the best fix-up novel. Like other ones that are good, you know, like I love Martian Chronicles. But you know, it's not done in the same way. The closest one is iRobot, where you've got a journalist that's interviewing Susan Calvin, and then she tells the stories. That is the closest. And again, did he borrow that from Simak? Because you look at the Naked Sun, as you were saying, Scott, and or the Caves of Steel and the Naked Sun. There's so much comparison there between City and those stories.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and Foundation too. Foundation itself, yeah.
Well, the first book of Foundation was 5 stories, and then the second 2 were all both basically novels. I think I remember that.
Yeah, and then the in between material was the encyclopedia. Little entries and stuff.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that was the interstitial material that held it together, and it works. But the person who was sort of the king of fix-up novels was A.E. Van Vogt, and he's the one that sort of created the term fix-up novel, and it became sort of popular use in the 80s, and it was mainly from the what's his name. Philip Nichols, or the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, the first edition.
Peter Nichols.
Peter Nichols,
So is that like null alien stuff?
It showed up in there, and then it became popular use in the late 70s and early 80s.
Very good.
Yes.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. No. I think, is there anything else you want to say? Or
No.
Other than it's dinner time for me, so
and on to story 5 and 6.
And next week, I don't know. Grix was saying that he would like to join, so I think having 4 at the most, like branding must have been held up somewhere or forgot about it. So, I
should be available if there's a spot.
Well, as I said, I'm usually available on Saturdays, but if there are new people haven't been on, let them on first, so everyone gets
the same way. You bet.
Yeah.
Happy to be
well,
here.
Aaron, we'll get Aaron on, because I think Aaron wants to join with us. And Grix, I've sent Grix a message to see when he's available. I know he's working like 2 jobs now or something like that.
You bet.
We'll see what happens for timing wise.
All right.
This was a lot of fun.
It is
most times.
Yeah. Next week I can go at your normal time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you both, and I'm glad people are liking it. That's the thing, because I wasn't quite sure, because I know Simak is sort of appearing on BookTube a little more in the past few years, but you know, it seems to be some people are going or you know, or they love it. So and so far I'm
liking it a lot.
Yeah,
me too.
So was this your first read of this book too, or is it?
For me, I was explaining to Sean last time. I've had that book in my possession at least twice. So if I have read it, it was so long ago. It would have been like in my teens. So it's as good as my first read.
Yeah. I've lost count of how many times I've read it. It's got to be close to 30 or more times I've read this. Yeah. I used to read it at least once or twice a year for like 20 years basically, and then I would read. My favorite story out of it is Huddling Place, so I would always read that as well if I just wanted something to sort of feel cozy about, I guess.
Yeah.
I would read Huddling Place.
All right.
Cool. Wonderful.
Okay,
well,
gentlemen. Then
thank you.
Next week.
Yes, definitely.
Bye to all the guests.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Aaron. Bye-bye, all.